Hey there, welcome back. So, I've been wanting to record this for a while, and I think it's because it addresses something that doesn't get talked about enough, and that's the unique relationship soft, sensitive, empathetic leaders have with money. And if you've ever felt weird about money, maybe guilty for wanting more of it, or like you have to choose between being kind and being profitable, this one's for you. Let's dive in. Ever wonder what it really takes to build a business and a life that feels like yours? Welcome to That Big CEO Energy. I'm Callie, entrepreneur, operations whiz, and your go-to for the real, raw, and unfiltered side of business and life. Because let's be honest, entrepreneurship isn't just about strategy and success. It's about figuring out who you are in the messy middle, trying new things, well, just because you can, and creating a life that actually fits you. From solo deep dives to candid convos with powerhouse business owners, we're talking all about the highs and the lows and the "why did no one warn me about this?" moments that come while chasing big dreams. So let's get uncomfortable, embrace the chaos, and make it happen. Here's what I've noticed is leaders of any kind in any company often carry very specific stories about money. I'm going to link a podcast episode that I just did with my budget besties on their podcast about my story with money. And I grew up being told, not necessarily being told, but right, like growing up with the persona that wanting money was greedy because the money that we had was used for bills. And my mom had to fight really, really hard to keep us out of desperation of poverty. And I feel like that has sort of lended itself to me subconsciously. If I wanted more money, I would think to myself, I'm being super greedy. And I would also maybe think to myself that caring about profit in my business would transition to I don't care about people. And I never wanted people to think that I didn't care about them. And so it's been a little bit of a journey, right? And sometimes I think that when you're truly good hearted, people think that you should be more focused on impact than income. And I think that the reality is that you can be focused on both. And so we internalize, right, this belief that there's something wrong with wanting financial success, that it's shallow, selfish, or maybe not quote unquote spiritual enough. And so what happens is we undercharge because we don't want to seem greedy. We give away too much for free because we want to be generous, right? And then we feel guilty when we make a lot of money because we think that it means that we're taking advantage of people. And I'm just here to say that having this underlying thing, especially in my life, of feeling guilty when I make money and feeling like I'm taking advantage of people has weighed on me, especially in the early years of my business. And it's sort of this like, I'm not charging what I'm worth because I don't recognize what my worth actually is. And so I've had to do a lot of work on that because I went from growing up, like I said, growing up where money just paid the bills. We didn't have money for anything extra. Sometimes we were robbing Peter to pay Paul for bills. We were borrowing money from people, right? Like I grew up broke and I never really understood what it was like to have excess. And I think that's why I sort of lean a little bit into this idea of like Dave Ramsey loosely, because As long as every dollar that I have is being told what to do, my nervous system doesn't get a chance to get out of control, right? Like, I know exactly how much excess money I have to spend on myself. I know how much money I need to pay bills because, like, I'm a spreadsheet queen. And so it regulates my nervous system. But some people don't ever get there. And if you are this person, just know that, like, I am speaking to you from a place of love. But most people don't ever get there because they are so consumed with guilt that somehow they must have taken a wrong turn somewhere because they have all of this money now. And that also means somehow that they're taking advantage of people. And I'm just here to tell you that if you are in that headspace, that is something that fear is driving that bus, and also the devil is in the details for that. Because it is okay to want to be profitable in your business. And it is also okay to be a generous person while you are building. And generous, the word generous, doesn't mean monetary all the time, right? Like sometimes I think people say, oh, your business is making X amount of dollars. That means you have X amount of dollars. That means you should be giving more. When the reality of the situation is maybe we have high debt. Maybe we have, kids that we are paying for, right? Like, people don't know the details of your life. And so it's really, really easy to get wrapped up into social media and see all of this display of my business is making so much money. That doesn't mean that that person is making that much money, right? It's like they're building a business and the business has to operate or be able to set up to be operated on its own. And so how do you do that, right? It takes revenue and it takes money. So I say all of that to say leaders struggle with money. CEOs struggle with money. Um, and it's a mindset piece. And I think it's really, really easy when we are a woman in business that maybe you had the similar background as I do, where maybe money wasn't talked about in your family. And now you're having to figure out, like, what does that even look like? And this struggle can show up in very specific ways, right? One I just briefly mentioned, which is undercharging. And we undercharge because we're afraid of being quote unquote too expensive or pricing someone out. We'd rather undervalue ourselves than risk making someone uncomfortable, right? And so what often happens is when we do undercharge, we then compensate and overdeliver. We give and give and give and give because we want to make sure that people feel like, they're getting their money's worth. But we don't set boundaries about what's included. So we end up being exhausted and resentful of our business. And then we probably avoid sales, right? Like if you are not a salesperson or have not come from a sales background before, you left corporate, or maybe you have a side hustle now, sales feels aggressive. It feels pushy. It feels manipulative. And so oftentimes we avoid it altogether. And then we wonder why our business isn't growing. And when you are just starting out on a business, when you're just starting out on a side hustle, you are everything, right? You are the marketing team, you are the sales team, you are the HR team, you are the operations. If you don't have any help, the number one thing that is the hardest to avoid is sales because it feels gross. And that's a struggle. That's a struggle with money that is underlying because you feel guilty when you do have success. When we do make money, we feel weird about it. It's like we don't deserve it, or like we should be giving more of it away. And I had probably my first 2 years of business where I was undercharging. And then I started to figure out that if I just took it baby steps at a time, and maybe this is what you need to hear. I have no idea. And I share this with my clients too. So because most of them struggle with money in the sense of self-worth and undercharging. So what I learned to do is I would land a client for X amount of dollars. And I would say to myself, okay, Callie, you need to half times that. So then the next person, the next consultation, I would half times it, right? And what I started noticing is that when I would explain what it is that they are getting from me, and then I would give them the dollar amount, they didn't even blink about it. And they still don't, which I know that I am severely still undercharging. But I started to realize, like, oh my gosh, I'm not charging enough. And it gradually got to a point where there was a few times that people would be like, that's too much. And then I would be able to say, what is within your budget? And I would negotiate the things that I would add or remove, whatever that is, to fit the budget that they had if the client was aligned. And I say if the client is aligned because we're not willy-nilly doing this. If you're a service provider, we are not willy-nilly doing this so that we get every client that we're sitting down in a meeting with, because not every client is for you, right? So I want us to sort of reframe this money situation as a tool and not a test, right? And here's the reframe that I want to offer you. And it's that money is not a measure of your mortality. It's a tool. Making money doesn't make you greedy. It makes you resourced. Wanting money doesn't make you shallow. It makes you honest about the reality of living in a world where money gives you options, right? And charging what you're worth doesn't make you unkind. It makes you sustainable. So you can be soft, you can be kind, you can be empathetic and generous, and still want to be financially successful. Those things are not in conflict with each other. In fact, I'd argue that leaders need to be well-resourced, because when you have financial stability, you can lead from a place of abundance instead of scarcity. You can lead from a place where you are getting the team members that you need for your business and not settling for those that are cheaper, because cheap doesn't always equal quality. And quality doesn't always equal cheap. And so you can be more generous in those areas because you're not operating from fear. So how do we actually build a healthier relationship with money? One of the things that I really have been working on, and it's through the work of therapy, let me tell you, is to separate my worth from my income, right? I'm not more valuable if I make more money, and I'm not less valuable if I make less. Your worth is inherent. And when you get clear on what money gives you, it's not about the money itself then. It's actually about what the money allows. And what does it allow in my life? In my life, it looks like freedom. It looks like security. It looks like the ability to care for the people that I love, like my mom, who has worked tirelessly her whole entire life. And it's the ability to be generous in the ways that you want to be, right? Like my mom and I have a trip coming up, and I would not be able to gift that to my mom and be generous in the ways that I want to be generous had I not worked on this piece of separating my worth from my money. And I had to be really, really clear about money being a tool. Like, it is there for you to use in your life. And I think part of that too is like practice this receiving, like if you are a super generous person and you're really great about giving, I also think then on the other side of that, we need to get better about receiving. Like when someone pays you, let yourself receive it without guilt. Let yourself receive it without shame. And charge based on value, not worthiness, right? Your pricing is not a statement about whether you're quote unquote good enough. It's a statement about the value that you provide and what they are receiving, right? Because they're using their money as a tool inside of their business. And if you are a service provider and you're providing value inside of their business, then they recognize that their tools are equaling value. Their tool doesn't look at your business and say, oh, it's worthy to pay that. That's not what it is. It actually has nothing to do with you. And so when we can kind of strip that down, I think it's easier for us to make money decisions from a calm place and not pressure, right? When we don't make pricing decisions when we're desperate and we don't say yes to clients when you're in scarcity, we're able to then ground ourselves first and then decide if that's something that we want to take on. Here's what I really want you to hear. You don't have to choose between being kind and being profitable, right? CEOs can build wildly successful, financially abundant businesses. Full stop. You just have to stop believing that wanting money makes you a bad person. And like everything, right? There is a point where it does become gluttony. And that's between you and God. I have no business telling you what is gluttonous and what is not in your own life. But you're allowed to want financial stability. You're allowed to want that. And you're allowed to want to be paid well for your work. You're allowed to want wealth, not just for yourself, but for your business, for freedom, for security, and for the generosity that it allows. And here's what I want you to take with you today. Your softness about who you are is not at odds with your financial success. You can be both kind and profitable. You can care so deeply about people and still charge what you're worth and what your business has as value. Money is not a test of your character. It's a tool that allows you to live and lead in alignment with your values. So if you're struggling with money, if you've been undercharging or feeling guilty about wanting more, I want to give you permission to let that go. And I want you to let it go so that you can build a calm, grounded relationship with money that supports the life and business that you actually want. The episode following this is going to be my budget besties sharing how we can do that easily, like how we can look at our business in such a way that makes sense. And it is like the most easy, mind-blowing thing. Like it blew my mind in the episode. So I want you to listen to the episode that comes right after this. But most of all, thanks for being here. And if this episode landed for you, maybe it's going to land for someone else. So share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And I'll see you in the next one. Hey, friend. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If something in this episode clicked for you, I want you to shoot me a DM over on Instagram. The link is in the show notes. Let's chat about how you're making the messy middle work for you. If you loved what you heard, would you mind sharing this episode with a friend who needs to hear it too? And drop a quick review if you don't mind. It helps get the word out, and I appreciate it more than you know. Catch you in the next one.